Hello, and welcome to a bonus box of Warhammer 40k's Grim History from Beyond. I'm Zekthar.
And I'm Yuxin.
And this week we have a very special bonus box. Our conclusion of the Terran Crusade.
Indeed, when last we spoke, Gulliman was captured by Kairos the Fateweaver. And with his capture, the Battle of the Starship Graveyard was lost. Those Imperial warriors who did not surrender under threat of the Primarch's death were killed or forced to capitulate. Champion Marius Amalric was amongst the latter, wrestled down and beaten unconscious by a mob of red corsairs as he single-handedly held the breach into his ship's engine area. The Loyalists and their stolen warships were taken under heavy guard to the nearest red corsairs' stronghold. To their shock, this turned out to be one of the ancient Blackstone fortresses. How such a mighty structure had found its way onto the tides of the Maelstrom, none of the Imperial warriors knew. Yet ultimately, it mattered little. Stripped of their weapons and their honor, Gulliman and his survivors, a force that included hundreds of Space Marines, Grey Knights, and Scutari, along with their engines of war, were dragged into the depths of the traitor fortress and hurled into psychic spell-shielded cells. The Adeptus Astartes were chained with adamantium links, while their leader still languished in the awful bonds of the crystallized guilt, anger, sorrow, and madness that Kairos had forged from his psyche. Led by the piratical Chaos Lord Verngar the Apostate, a huge warband of red corsairs garrisoned the Blackstone Fortress. Much of the structure slumbered, for the traitors lacked the knowledge to awaken the ancient alien construct or access the shrouded regions near its heart. Still, their fortifications were well built, their numbers huge, and their fleet powerful. Kairos Fateweaver deemed that this would be as good a prison as any to leave Rabute Gilman in to rot. Though the Lord of Change had been vehement in his efforts to remove Gilliman from the galactic stage, he did not wish the Primarch to die.
Why?
He wants him to go insane. But simply.
I kind of got that, but at the same time, why? Why doesn't he just kill him?
Well, first of all, where would be the fun in that? I mean, you're high chaos being... Oh, we can either slit this guy's throat or have him just go insane and just randomly destroy things, causing chaos and mayhem.
I'm thinking part of it might also have to do with the fact that Zinch told him not to kill Rabute, but that's for a different reason that we'll get to later on. But
yes.
That's honestly, anyways, that's the only thing I could think of because, I mean, well, it just doesn't make any sense. This is the most powerful being in the Imperium. We have him right where we want him. So we're going to kill him? Oh, no. We're just going to leave him in this prison cell so that he can eventually break out. Well, why? Because I said so. Okay. It's almost as bad as like a villain monologuing. It's just...
Yeah.
It's like, what? No, just off with his head. Whack. That's all you got to do. Game over, man. But sorry. Carry on.
A chained demigod was too rich a source of power to simply cast aside, and Kairos planned to keep his victim hidden away in the Maelstrom until certain future junctures were reached. Already, the demon could see several moments where unleashing a Primarch driven insane might produce most intriguing results. The Red Corsairs, for their part, would readily act as Gilliman's jailers in return for the boons of foresight that Kairos could grant, and so the Fateweaver felt confident that his captive would remain locked away.
Yes. Well, that's okay. Sorry, but that's a pretty sketchy goal there. I hear what you're saying, anyways, and what you said, anyways. You wanted to drive him mad so that he could randomly unleash him upon his enemies, but that's
not necessarily even his enemies. Just release him.
Just release him for the fun of it.
Yeah,
that's still that's a pretty lofty goal, man. I don't know. That's really rolling the
fact
dice.
that Gulliman was already suffering from mental anguish already at this point.
Yeah, but I mean,
give it a few more years. I'm pretty sure he would break into
Yeah, but that's still, you're holding him for a few more years that you need to. I mean, to me, okay, me personally, I think that's just that's definitely a roll of the dice. I don't think it was a very good idea. Let's put it that way. And then again, as we know, anyways, Kairos can only see the future and the past. He can't really look at the present and make situational developments there.
And as they already mentioned, he could already see different opportunities and different interesting. He may have been going, wow, this would be actually awesome if this happened. I guess we should probably keep it.
Yeah, but the other thing they don't tell you, though, is if he can see all avenues of the future, that means he also sees all the terrible things that could take place. And he's looking at both of those and making a judgment of it's worth it, which we've also mentioned anyways that he's also a little, a little out there, a little insane. So that also might help.
Well, he's chaos.
Yeah, true. Well, sorry. You kind of answered your own question there, but yeah. Carry on, sir.
Yet, from the depths of space and the warp, Roboute Gulliman's presence had not gone unnoticed. From the depths of the Maelstrom came an enormous armada. Dozens upon dozens of warships thundered towards the Blackstone fortress, their hulls encrusted with gore and skulls. The rune of Khorne was branded upon these spiked battleships, and demonic fires danced in their wake. Before the fleet blazed a monstrous blood-red comet, wreathed in furious black flame. A fanged maw yawned wide upon that hurtling fireball, and eyes swimming with insane fury stared from its depths. So came Skarbrand, the exiled one, to the Blackstone fortress, blazing through the void to crash with explosive force into the station's outer hull.
And who is this Skarbrand fellow, Huxon?
So Skarbrand is a bloodthirster who was put this way. He was so bent on destruction that he ended up trying to go against Khorne.
He had a little help there. I mean, you can't put all that on Skarbrand. He had a little nudging in that direction by our good friend Zinch.
And yet, though,
now he's just pretty much, I mean, calling him a bloodthirster at this point is almost not true. Just on the concept of where his mind is and how violent he is, which is saying something.
Yeah, he's just basically trying to destroy anything he can get his hands on at this point.
He is the Hulk on a very, very bad day. Oh, with axes.
Yeah.
And wings. I mean, it's probably the best way to put it, right? He is rage incarnate. So he is literally like the Hulk anyways when Bruce Banner is not there.
And then on the flip side, though, he's willing to align with other Chaos God factions.
Well, at this point, he's like you said anyways, he has been exiled by Khorne.
Yeah, he was sort of thrown in a about 8 days and 8-night travel.
Okay, so maybe a little bit of history on this guy. So he originally was the greatest of Khorne's champions, his greatest general. I mean, he is the guy who first razed to the ground Slaanesh's first palace. He destroyed Nurgle's Leviathan or Pox Villain or whatever the hell it is, and then he ended up getting anyways his two axes, which is called, I believe, Slaughter and Carnage. And after that, anyways, I think Zinch found him to be a little too powerful, so he started nudging his brain anyways in the direction of he was so powerful that he could beat Khorne as long as he got a good whack in while Khorne wasn't looking. And he tried, and he failed miserably because it's Khorne. So Khorne, being pissed off about this, literally burned out his entire mind, leaving all that was left anyways was his rage. And then he showed everybody anyways what he did to his prize bloodthirster, and then hucked him through the warp, where he flew for 8 days and 8 nights because it's Khorne, where he eventually landed. And now, anyways, he will fight for anybody provided it gives him the satisfaction of war and blood.
Which is kind of funny because that means he's doing more for Korn than when he wasn't exiled.
Right. And Korn will never bring him back into the fold because it's Korn. But at the same time, it's kind of, I find it amusing anyways. He, like you said, he's done more for Korn since he's been exiled than when he worked for him. So so if this guy has shown up anyways, then Kairos Fateweaver is really is in a bit of a pickle. So how does Kairos try to get rid of this monstrosity there, Yuxin?
Well, Kornate warships sped in his wake, fanning out to hammer the battle station with firepower even as teeming swarms of landing craft spilled from their flanks. The Red Corsairs, first surprised and then outraged at this sudden attack, rallied swiftly and fought back, even as their fortifications were opened to the void and blasted to blazing scrap. The Corsairs' gun batteries cycled up and filled the void with fire. Havoc squads sent volleys of shots lancing out to blast landing craft from the air, while obliterators directed withering fire into the Kornate hordes, already spilling across the fortress's outer hull. A furious battle raged in the silence of space. Thumping explosions plucking Kornate berserkers from the fortress's night black skin and sending them tumbling away into the void. Within the black stone, flashes of pale green luminescence danced along darkened corridors, the ancient structure warning its denizens of danger. Red Corsairs deployed in disciplined firing lines, then filled entire passageways with crashing bolter fire as masses of Kornate warriors charged towards them. Chain axes carved through armor and flesh, while bolt-riddled corpses crashed to the ground aflame. Through the mayhem stalked Kairos, screeching with dismay at this unforeseen turn of events, conjuring forth masses of Zentian demons. He hurled them into battle in attempts to drive back the invaders, yet bloody mists were gathering as the slaughter continued, and from their depths sprang red-scaled cohorts of Kornate demons that eagerly joined the carnage. Meanwhile, deep within the fortress's hidden core, eldritch energies flickered into life, unseen by warring armies. A band of figures slipped from a webway portal that had lain at the fortress's heart since the dawn of its existence, millions of Terran years before. They moved swiftly and silently, a lithe procession of shadows accompanied by a larger robed figure that moved with the stealth of a ghost. Gulliman and his Ultramarines were shut inside cells that lined the circular walls of a huge cylindrical chamber. These alcoves were closed off, not by metal bars or locked doors, but by flickering sheets of sorcerous mutagenic flame. A full squad of Red Corsairs stood guard over them, their guns trained unwaveringly upon the one functioning doorway that led into this shadowy prison. Unseen, another doorway slid open in the chamber's curving wall directly behind the gods. In absolute silence, the harlequins of the Laughing God rolled, tumbled, and spun within, their movements a sinister dance to some unheard song of the dead. They drew closer to the renegade Space Marines with every graceful step, naked blades held ready for murder. The first the Red Corsairs knew of their peril was a sudden whirlwind attack from behind. Perfectly dispersed and lethally poised, the Eldari struck with a murderous grace. Rapier blades punched out through chest plates and sprays of blood. Monofilament needles slithered through the chinks in their victims' power armor, liquefying organs in milliseconds. Point-blank hails of shuriken and fusion energies hurled traitor corpses to the floor in mists of blood. A single one of the traitors, unhelmed and horn-headed, roared in pain as the Harlequin drove her blade through one of his knee joints, then cartwheeled around him to kick his bolter from his hands. She completed her attack with an elegant backflip, one foot catching the traitor under the chin and smashing him onto his back. The Harlequin sprang away, and the Red Corsair fumbled for his sidearm. He froze as a robed figure in ornate power armor loomed over him, The traitor had never heard of Cypher, for the fallen angel was an enigma whose existence was hidden from most. Alvarius? No. He did, however, recognize the threat of 2 bolt pistols now hovering before his face. Wordlessly, Cypher stared down at the red corsair, his eyes glinting beneath his cowl. The traitor stared back, yellowed gaze burning with defiance and hate. Cypher gestured with one of his pistols towards the cells that lined the walls. The movement was minimal, but the meaning was clear. Growling low in his throat, the corsair reached slowly into a pouch at his belt and drew forth a rune-inscribed amulet, the key to dispelling the psychic magics that held the cells closed. Cypher nodded his gratitude, then raised one booted foot and stamped down on the traitor's head. Bone smashed and blood sprayed, the red corsair's body twitching, then lying still. Holstering his bolt pistol, the fallen angel plucked the key from his victim's open gauntlet and then straightened up. He found himself staring into the shifting mask of the shadow seer Salandri Veilwalker. It was she who had contacted Gulliman as he wandered lost in the Maelstrom, as well as enlist Cypher's aid and instructed Belisarius Call to leave his forge on Mars before the fall of Cadia. Veilwalker sketched a mocking bow to Cypher, then pointed her staff towards a distant cell. With a nod, Cypher turned and strode towards it. Through dancing flames, Gulliman watched the robed figure approach. The Primarch did not recognize this cowled space marine, but he knew the legion whose colors he wore. "You are Rabute Gilliman," said the mysterious space marine as he stopped outside the Primarch's cell.
"And you are one of the Lion's sons. You keep questionable company, Dark Angel. Who are you, and why are you here?"
"I can free you," replied the hooded figure, deigning not to answer the Primarch's questions. Realizing that no further explanation was forthcoming, Gulliman frowned.
"Can, not will. What do you want in return?"
"You will take me to Terra, to the throne." The malefic flames crackled, and the distant sound of battle rumbled on as Gilliman's silence stretched long. Even bound in sorcerer's chains, the Primarch's presence was immense, his steady glare thunderous. Yet the Dark Angel stood unwavering, like a statue carved from granite. Gilliman strained once more against his bonds and again found them unyielding.
"It seems that my choices are to rot here, or accede to your demand. The former would be to fail in my duty, so I suppose it will have to be the latter. But understand this, Dark Angel. If you seek to trick or manipulate me, nothing in this galaxy will save you."
One corner of the stranger's mouth lifted into a small, bitter smile. "As you say," then brandished the runic stone held in his offhand. The flames of Gilliman's cell died away in response, followed by the fires of every other cell in the chamber's edge. Now, before we carry on, I must give a little background on who Salandri Veilwalker is.
Ooh, good. I personally have looked her up. I can't find a whole lot on her. What did you find out about her there, Houston?
Well, first of all, she's a Veilwalker, which is a sort of a title for the Harlequins, more focused on the Shadow Walker, Veil Walkers, sort of.
Like the Mask of the Veiled Path.
Yeah, they're kind of a Veil Walker is similar to a Shadow Seer is what they are. For those who don't know what Shadow Seers are, they're kind of like the Harlequin's version of a Psyker.
Oh, so it's kind of like the Aldari's version of a Farseer?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Many people think that Veil Walker is a title given to some of the Shadow Seers.
Well, the first that I found about her, I see her in history anyways, is in M34, and she runs into she actually recruits a good friend of yours, Fabius Bile. So I mean, I wouldn't recommend people thinking of her as a good guy. Let's put it that way.
She is a follower of Kegarak, is what she is, and
yeah,
the Joker pretty much to the letter. which if you read anything about the Harlequins, they can do good things or they can do bad things. It depends on where you are and what happens to be the situation.
Regardless of what they do, nothing they ever do anyways is straightforward. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Like there's a case where literally they first went, you guys are going to be under attack. And the Imperial government was like, yeah, right, now. And because they didn't believe the Harlequins decided to attack them and then ducked out. So what ended up happening was the Imperial ended up gathering this huge fleet there to try to face them off, but they disappeared. And then all of a sudden, a Tyranid fleet, I believe it was, pops up. I'm like, well, yeah, listen to it beforehand.
That's another thing that's pretty that seems pretty repetitive with the Harlequins too. Is they tend to get a lot more people to fight their battles for them.
Which, to be fair, they aren't very high in population numbers.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of them, so it kind of makes sense that they do that. But at the same time, it seems like the stuff that I've read about them, anyways, when that does take place, it's kind of, I don't know, it's always really backhanded, and it always sucks. It never turns out well good for anybody other than the Harlequins. So I know you like the Harlequins, Yuxin. I'm still kind of on the fence with them. I do like the fact, anyways, that they're incredibly sneaky. They're probably some of the best assassins you could find, anyways, in the galaxy.
Very enigmatic.
But
that's one of the things I like about is how enigmatic they are.
I mean,
and let's face it, they did help, get called where you needed to be to actually,
that is true. Solandri Veilwalker, the first time I catch notice of her, anyways, in more recent history is during the 13th Black Crusade. She does pop up in 988.m41, where she manipulates Xander Cross into stopping an Orc Wog, targeting an Exodite world. But yes, towards the beginning of the 13th Black Crusade, Veilwalker, and this is actually something that's fairly important to our story, is Veilwalker revealed herself to whatever.
Veilwalker, not Veal.
Well,
she isn't a food.
Like she revealed herself. Get it? Huh? I got dad jokes. Anyways, she revealed herself to call and send him on kind of like a quest to find an artifact that ends up helping him during the Cadia. Now, mind you, it doesn't help a whole lot because Cadia still blew up, but it did send him anyways on the path anyways to the Celestidian Crusade, which did eventually wake up Gulliman, which gets them actually to this point in time.
Yeah.
So she is kind of really important to this whole story, but kind of like a puppet master in the background sort of way.
She's kind of just like sort of going, no, you can't go that way. You need to go this way. Just go this way.
Go this way. It's like shooing a little dog in a direction.
This way. There's a certain path that you're supposed to take.
Now, Cypher, anyways, we have talked about Cypher quite a bit. And if you want to know more, anyways, I actually did a little Vox on Cypher. But he in and of himself, anyways, is kind of an enigma wrapped in a puzzle. But the one thing, though, that I haven't been able to figure out.
Hilarious. I mean,
true. The thing, though, that I haven't been able to figure out, anyways, is why Solandri, anyways, ended up hiring him. I mean, don't get me wrong; he's a powerful ally, but I don't understand why she did. Maybe I'll dig more into Cypher. Maybe there's more explanation there. But obviously, anyways, Cypher wants to go to the Golden Throne. That's why he's there. I understand why he's there. I don't understand why she hired him, though. Did you ever find out about that or through your research?
No.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll do some more digging. And if you guys listening, anyways, know why, by all means, anyways, leave it in the comments. But anywho, as the fires flickered out, Solandri Veilwalker stepped forward and began weaving an elaborate dance. Gilliman's eyes widened as he recognized the figure who had appeared to him in his visions and directed him towards freedom. Well, real quick, anyways, this is another thing, too, that we didn't quite mention. We kind of danced around it just now, anyways. But she is the one, anyways. Like I said, I got the egg jokes. But she was also the one, anyways, that kind of directed Gulliman and the Terran Crusade out of the Maelstrom.
Yeah.
last week when we were talking about it. I know I was really hoping it was Mal's, but turned out to be this Harlequin. Anyways, moving on. Gilliman's eyes widened as he recognized the figure who had appeared to him in his vision and directed him towards freedom. Had the Eldar meant for him to escape the Maelstrom? Or she'd always intended the Terran Crusade fleet to be ambushed and brought here? Only time could tell. Shimmering lights coiled around the dancing Harlequin. Where the lich light fell, the chains binding the loyalist space marines fell away as dust. Even the devious sorceries of Kairos Fateweaver were undone. And Gulliman smiled a dangerous smile as his crystal fetters shattered. The freed Ultramarines still wore their armor, but were unarmed. Answering their questions before they could be asked, the Shadow Seer revealed that the Loyalist weapons, their vehicles, and their allies had been locked inside a string of stasis vaults, some distance from their cells. Gulliman gestured for his mysterious benefactors to lead on. The Primarch did not trust the Eldar, nor the shadowy space marine who had come with them. But while his brilliant mind worked out the angles of their involvement, he would allow them to lead him to the rest of his forces. After all, Gulliman would never abandon the courageous allies who had accompanied him upon his quest. Veil Walker and her Harlequins led the Loyalists out of the doorway through which she had entered the prison. Several hundred battle-hungry Ultramarines followed her lead, with Gulliman, Cato Sicarius, and Cypher at their head. It was a capable force, even without guns and blades, and they traveled at a run down shadowy corridors and stairwells. Haste was more important than stealth. Even with the battle raging above, their escape would soon be noticed. The first stasis chamber they broke open contained Saint Celestine. The second brought a reunion with Archmagos Belisarius Call and his Mechanicus forces. With Doomcrawlers stalking at their backs and ranks of Scutari and Cataphren battle servitors lending their firepower, the Loyalists swiftly overwhelmed the Red Coursers, standing guard over the final stasis chamber. Within they found not only Aldrich Voldus, his Grey Knight brothers, and their Dread Knights, but all the other Space Marines of the Terran Crusade. Captain Sicarius now suggested that they cut a swift path through the battle to reclaim their starships. Veil Walker shook her head. She knew another way to escape, the route Cypher and the Harlequins had used to reach Gilliman, and the route they would use to lead him on towards Terra. At the fortress's heart, trembled by ancient technology and still operational after many standard millennia, was a stabilized route into the webway. The pathways it led into were huge, arterial routes that even starships could navigate, and they would accommodate the Imperial war machines with ease. Bursting from the armory, the Imperial army and their guides made for the lower tunnels. The awakening of the fortress's deeper chambers had not gone unnoticed, however. As they hastened further into the ancient structure, the Loyalists encountered stiffening resistance from bands of Red Coursers and demons sent to cut them off. Though Gilliman and his followers fought furiously, their advance slowed to a crawl, and they found themselves surrounded on every side. Matters looked grim, but it was in that moment that spectral flames leapt amidst the foe. Aspect readings flickered wildly, and ghostly voices whispered and hissed. Through the Vox network, as shadowy figures stepped from the inferno and opened fire. Clad in black and bone, wreathed in etheric fire, the Legion of the Damned had arrived in the Terran Crusade's hour of need. The thunderous volley swept the Chaos forces from the bridges of Gilliman's Four, and, with Veil Walker whirling and leaping at his side, the Primarch led the advance once again.
Oh no, not these guys again.
Yes, these guys again. The Legion of the Damned. I figured we could take a little bit of time anyways to discuss the Legion of the Damned, also known as the MacGuffin of the Imperium.
No. They're the MacGuffins of the Space Marines. We have multiple MacGuffins of the Imperium. I mean,
right, true.
Paul for all the tech, he's done it all.
Well, I think we have the most MacGuffins in one scenario, I think, right here.
We have because we have Call, we have Celestine, and we now have the Legion of the Damned.
The Legion of the Damned, yes.
So for those of you who don't know, the Legion of the Damned is a Loyalist Imperial Space Marine chapter? Maybe? We don't really know. What we do know is that they just kind of randomly pop up whenever things are going really bad for the Imperium. And then they fight for the Imperial side, and then they just kind of disappear back into who knows where they come from. One of their hallmarks is that they are, first off, they fight in complete silence. The other thing, too, is that they normally have like flames actually coming off of them, hence the name Legion of the Damned.
And
They
even
are
their
very
armor is black with flame coloring.
yeah. I mean, they're more legend than they are reality, but they seem to be popping up more and more in the 41st millennium, which is kind of worrisome, quite frankly. But anyways, yes, it's the Legion of the Damned. They're back. Anyways, long bloody minutes of battle followed, gunfire flashing back and forth in the gloom. Though both sides raced as fast as they could to beat the other to the prize, Gulliman and his army reached the heart of the Blackstone Fortress at the same time as their foes. The chamber itself was vast, easily 100 Terran miles across. Both its ceiling and its floor were lost in shadow. Countless dark doorways opened into the Blackstone Fortress's heart, huge portals that seemed wrought for giants. From some spilled demons of Zinch, fires flaring amidst the darkness. Others vomited the demons of Korn, loping in snarling packs across soaring bridges wide enough for titans to cross. Many of the massing demons were still distant, small figures rendered insectile by the scale of the chamber, but great hosts of them would still intercept Gilliman's forces before they could reach the heart of the chamber. That was where they must go, however. Veil Walker indicated a distant platform set into the black column's flank. Upon it, Gilliman could see the faint shimmer of esoteric energies dancing, and knew that this was the webway entrance of which the Shadow Seer spoke. Gulliman ordered the advance. His forces flowed out across the nearest bridges, guided through the labyrinth of the interconnected platforms and arc bridges by the tropes of the veiled path. Loping dread knights and roaring space marine tanks led the way, squads of Adeptus Astartes, Grey Knights, and Scutari advancing behind them. The crossing became more dangerous as firepower whipped across the yawning gulfs to tear at the loyalist ranks. Fights broke out as red coursers let fly from higher walkways, and cannons of corn spat screaming skulls. Platforms as broad as a parade grounds played host to the crashing battles as packs of demon engines clashed with squadrons of ultramarine main battle tanks. The loyalists fired as they moved, blasting past through the massing foe. At the same time, the forces of Korn and Zinch fell upon one another, bloodletters hacking their way down ichor-slick stairways, while Hor scoured platforms clear with shimmering flame. Far away across the chamber, Gilliman caught sight of Kairos Fateweaver, exhorting his followers into battle and hurling bolts of psychic sorcery at the loyalists from afar. Yet the Lord of Change clearly did not care to face Gilliman's resurgent wrath, for he stayed far removed from the white heat of the battle. Not so Scarbrand. Hacking his way through the gaping portal in the chamber's wall, the bloodthirster blazed.
Okay, hold on a sec. We have established that Kairos, to begin with, is decrepit,
Yes,
uses a cane.
indeed. Well,
So,
he's got to walk.
Even if it was, let's just say, I don't know, maybe just anything. If he can't nail it with any sort of psychic ability, pretty much anything could take him on.
He still is a greater demon of Zinch, though. So I mean, he's still pretty beefy. Yes, a Primarch should be able to throttle this guy if he ever gets in combat with him. Quite frankly,
Space Marine should
a
be able to throttle.
Custodes could do it. Depends on what Space Marine. Quite frankly, it's because if we noticed, as you noticed last time, anyways, he had a whole plethora of Space Marines in front of him trying to shoot and kill him, and their bolts just, I mean, they just disappeared in front of him. So
Right. His viewpoint, though, if you think about it, is like, why on earth would he be charging forwards, though? Really?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. It's still at the same time, anyways. It should be noted, anyways, that he took one look at Gilliman and was like, "Yeah, I ain't going near that thing." he looks a little upset, my lord. Yes, he does. Let's leave this to the giant bloodthirster, shall we? Anyways, speaking of bloodthirster, Garbrand hacked his way through a gaping portal in the chamber's wall, blazing like a furious pyre. His bellows echoed through the cavernous space, primal roars of bloodlust that infected the minds of all who heard him. Under Scarbrand's influence, Gilliman's battle brothers became more reckless and aggressive by the moment. Contaminated by the demon's psychic fury, Marius Almeric, and the last of the Black Templars turned aside from their route and hurled themselves into an onrushing mass of cornate demons. Blood sprayed as the savage melee broke out. For a moment, the Primarch considered diverting his own forces to help Almeric's. But with Skarbrand storming closer, the demons swarming on every front, there was no time. With a heavy heart, Gulliman barked orders through the Vox, steadying the Ultramarines and the Primogenitor allies with the sheer force of his will. Bellowing, Almeric hurled himself into battle with mighty Skarbrand, his black sword clashing with the Bloodthirster's twin axes again and again. With Voldus and the Dread Knights leading, and the relentless specters of the Legion of the Damned fighting a silent rear guard, the remains of the Terran Crusade closed on the webway entrance. Belisarius' Call and the Scutari mowed down rank after rank of demons. Nova Marine Vindicators blasted a trio of bridges that the enemy were using in an attempt to outflank, sending flailing horrors plunging into the void. Inquisitor Greyfax and St. Celestine fought side by side, hacking down a trio of Zinchian heralds and a mini solar minutes. Okay, so I gotta stop here for half a second. This is, by the way, a far cry from when we started, anyways, with Greyfax. I mean, when we started with Greyfax,
I to say that far cry from I should shoot her in the head.
Yeah.
Saying things that may be blasphemous.
We went from that to them being like the best of chums. Wherever Celestine is, Greyfax is there. So, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Greyfax, but it seems like she's grown up just a smidge.
Yeah.
Put it that way. Anyways, the Harlequins were everywhere at once, sprinting along walkways, bounding between bridges, hacking and slashing with breathtaking skill as they wove a dance of battle around the Loyalists. That was when Skarbrand gave a deafening bellow of fury and took a running leap. The cursed Bloodthirster sailed across the gulf, trailing boiling ichor from a terrible wound in his chest. Gilliman's eyes widened as he saw Almeric's black blade driven into the Bloodthirster's breast. It was the only remaining sign of the Emperor's champion, bloody atonement for his failings on Lost Cadia. Skarbrand landed with a tremendous crash, hooves striking sparks as he slammed down on the bridge amidst the Legion of the Damned. His axes, slaughter, carnage, swept left and right. Fire-wreathed specters were smashed aside, their broken bodies tumbling away like embers into the darkness below. Already, the rearmost warriors of Gilliman's forces were turned back, tanks and battle brothers alike lost the Bloodthirster's madness. Realizing control was about to slip from his grasp, Gilliman commanded all the remaining Imperials to make for the portal. A final bridge leapt out across the void to connect the platform on which Gulliman stood to the one where the portal flickered. The Primarch took position at the head of the bridge, standing firm with the blade drawn, as all who could still follow his orders did so. Infantry and vehicles streamed past him, following the Harlequins into the webway, until only Kairos Sicarius and Celestine remained, waiting by the portal's entrance. Skarbrand stormed through the last of the Legion of the Damned and onto the platform. Gilliman felt the structure shudder and flex beneath the Bloodthirster's weight. Then the greater demon's burning eyes found Gilliman's, and the Primarch felt unreasoning fury surge through him. Skarbrand had come for Gilliman's skull, that he might honor Khorne with it, and the demon did not intend to allow his quarry to escape now. In Gilliman's mind, hellish fires rose up on every side, full of the leering faces of his brothers who had fallen to chaos. With every step that Skarbrand took towards him, Gilliman's ire grew. While at his back, the bridge seemed to melt away as molten slag until there was nothing but the Primarch and the Bloodthirster, trapped together in an arena of roaring flame. Unable to stop himself, the Primarch bellowed a war cry and leapt to meet Skarbrand's charge. The Emperor's sword met slaughter with a dolorous clang, while carnage whistled over the Primarch's head by a hair's breadth. Gilliman drove his shoulder guard into the opponent's midriff, then spun on his heel and backfisted Skarbrand with a hand of dominion. The blow would have punched straight through a tank hull, yet the Bloodthirster merely rocked back on his heels before launching himself forward again. Hell-forged axes hacked and lashed in huge haymaker arcs, Gilliman barely blocking or evading each blow. The Primarch could feel his hate and rage building to new heights, eclipsing his strategic sense altogether. Dimly he realized that soon he would hurl himself at Skarbrand, hacking madly until his head was struck from his shoulders. With a titanic effort of will, Rabute Gulliman forced down the supernaturally created rage that was drowning his rational mind. Gasping with effort, the Primarch trapped the furious fires in a ring of cold, mental steel. Even as he continued to fight his monstrous foe in reality, he fought a second battle in his mind. Step by step, he pushed back against his blazing rage. With a final scream of mental anguish, Gulliman forced down all his fury and hatred and locked them away behind an impenetrable mental fortifications. As he did so, the fires that he perceived around him died away, and the bridge to safety swam back into focus. Beyond it, Sicarius and St. Celestine were exhorting him to move before it was too late. Unwilling to let his enemy escape, Skarbrand hurled himself in a wild lunge with axes raised high. Gulliman coolly assessed the threat, raising the hand of Dominion and blasting the demon backwards. Skarbrand bellowed in anger as explosive shells tore into his cranium and blew fleshy gobbets across the platform. Step by step, the demon was driven back. Yet still, he did not fall. Gritting his teeth at the sight of the enemy drawing close, Gulliman fired the last shells from his magazine, aiming at Almeric's black sword. A single bolt struck the weapon and blew the ebony blade apart in a storm of deadly shards. Skarbrand's torso was shredded, and he toppled backwards off the platform with a final, furious roar. Immediately, Gulliman turned and sprinted across the bridge, hurling himself into the webway after Captain Sicarius and the living saint. Behind him, the portal's warding runes sealed with a sharp crack, denying the surging tide of demons at the very last second.
The remaining warriors of the Terran Crusade stood amidst the shimmering mists of the webway. They were gathered in a vague space, its dimensions vast and confusing. Lights glimmered around them, and a distant booming rolled through the air, akin to a titanic heartbeat, or the sound of waves washing upon a rocky shore. Of the Imperial warriors who had escaped their cells, around 2/3 remained. Voldus and his Grey Knights had only taken a handful of casualties, and the same was true of the Harlequins. Cypher, too, had survived the desperate running battle through the fortress, and stood now at the head of a band of dark-armored space marines, who had clearly awaited his return. As Gulliman's battered warriors regrouped, Salandri Veilwalker came before the Primarch. She paused for a moment to stare a long and loaded look with the Archmagos Belisarius call, before turning to Gulliman without a word of explanation. She counseled that they could not tarry for long. She had laced this region of the webway with scout parties of Skyweaver jet bikes. Those scouts were now reporting back, warning of heavily armed intruders wearing ornate power armor of blue and gold. The warriors had the stench of chaos sorcery on them, an unmistakable mark of Zench. Gilliman's mind raced, weaving fragments of fact and glimpses of information with his peerless strategist's intuition. It wasn't long before it dawned on him who had put all of this together. It was Magnus. Events began to fall into place in Gilliman's mind. Magnus had hurled Gilliman's crusade into the Maelstrom not to destroy it, but to weaken it. He had propelled the Lord of Ultramar onto a particular path of fate that Magnus had either hoped or known would lead him to his capture, incarceration within the very specific goal, and eventual escape into this section of the webway.
I understand that. I mean, it's brilliant, this whole thought process anyways, but this is what I would call, like, this is pretty thin.
Yeah.
I mean, part of me thinks anyways, at this point anyways, Magnus is kind of playing chess while all of his brothers are playing checkers.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But the other thing too is that it seems like Magnus is thinking like 12 moves ahead, but not thinking about like 2 moves ahead. I don't know if you've ever done that in chess where you're like, I have this all planned out. And then like 2 moves in, all of a sudden your opponent does something completely different. And you're like, well, there goes that whole strategy. That's kind of what's about to take place here. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Swiftly and earnestly, Gilliman sought the counsel of his closest lieutenants. They had to determine what Magnus planned, and quickly, before they stepped straight into the demon Primarch's trap. It was Aldrich Voldus who, drawing upon his knowledge of Titan's ancient libraries, made the intuitive leap. There was a warded entrance to the webway within the Imperial Palace. Voldus believed it to be heavily defended, bound shut with the most potent abjurations that the Imperium could muster, but it still existed. Perhaps Magnus knew of that gate and sought to follow them to it. Gulliman's mind raced as the truth began to dawn on him. Magnus already knew where the gate lay, he realized. There had been whispers that the Crimson King had passed that way just before the outbreak of the Horus Heresy. In so doing, unleashed the catastrophe that fell upon him and his 15th Legion.
So this is the Golden Throne Warpway project, right? That they're talking about.
Yeah.
This is the one where he showed up to warn the Emperor about Horus, but ripped it open so demon upon demon came in. Okay. Was it also the same one anyways? Was this the same gate that he came back through during the Siege of Terra to do battle with Vulcan?
I don't know.
Because that was also kind of an interesting thing that took place. He kept trying to kill Vulcan, and as you know, you can't really kill Vulcan. So I think he eventually crushed his skull, right?
Vulcan, yeah.
Yeah. Vulcan
bashed his skull in. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's the one anyways. Like, Father, I have something to tell you. Hey, why is everything on fire? And why does everybody look pissed off? It's that gate. Gotcha. But sorry, carry on.
Magnus did not need them to lead him to the gate. He sought instead to follow them through it, clearly hoping that the gate's defenses would be deactivated to allow for Gilliman's arrival. The demon Primarch wanted to strike at Terra, at the very golden throne of the Emperor of Mankind, and he hoped to launch his attack as the gate was thrown open to permit the Ultramarines' Primarch passage. The Terran Crusade, ironically, could not emerge at Terra, Gulliman realized with something like despair, not if it meant allowing Magnus to strike at the cradle of humanity. Yet, Salandri Veilwalker had never intended for them to take that road. Instead, the Shadowseer revealed a secret that the Eldar had long guarded. Lying dormant for millennia, hidden behind a veil of wards that even humanity's greatest psychers could not pierce. A lonely spar of the webway stretched out upon the border between real space and the warp to connect to Luna, Terra's only natural moon. It was to that illusion-veiled gate that the Crusade must now make haste. With their path chosen, the survivors of the Terran Crusade set out at once. All who had set forth from Ultramar had been prepared to give their lives for this cause, and to endure any hardship they must in order to see the reborn Roboute Gilliman safely to Terra. Nothing had changed. The webway changed and shifted around them, from misty passage to dark and echoing tunnels, brightly lit expanses of polyhedral crystal to weirdly fleshy spirals that pulse with digestive motion. The Loyalists surely would have been lost within solar minutes had they traveled alone, or else set upon by the predatory entities that haunted the labyrinth dimension. Yet, with the Harlequins as both guides and escorts, the Imperial forces were able to proceed unchallenged. As Gilliman and his warriors thundered across a hazy, crystal-studded cavern, sudden volleys of firepower scythed into them from the flanks. 15 warriors fell to that first volley, punched off their feet by bolt shells wreathed in coruscating flame. Rhinos exploded amidst leaping blasts of psychic sorcery, while Skitarii degenerated into howling mutant flesh as the fires of change washed over them. Gilliman barked his orders, and the Loyalists fanned out as one, dropped into firing crouches amidst the crystal outcroppings. From all around, swimming into focus through the veiling mist, came the plying automata of Thousand Suns Rubikai. The armored golems played their bolters right and left as they advanced, laying down a steady hail of ensorcelled bolts. Hordes of shrieking Zangors moved amongst them, brandishing silvered blades. Now, before we carry on, Zekthar, you want to give a brief explanation on what the Rubikai are?
Sure. The Rubikai, also known as the Rubric Marines. So Yuxin, you remember anyways the fall of Prospero? We've talked about it a few times.
Yes.
Where Leman and Rust kind of kicked the crap out of Magnus the Red, and they all had to flee pretty much. those that were left.
Yeah.
When they did, anyways, the only person that was left, anyways, that was in charge was Ahriman. And they still had that problem, anyways, about, the changing with the Thousand Suns. So he makes a deal with Zench saying, hey, if we do this whole spell thing, that should fix everything with the changing. So we don't have to worry about that ever again. And Zench said, that's cool. And he helped him out doing it. But as usual, anyways, Zench doesn't say everything that takes place.
There are loopholes.
Yeah, so the spell became known as the Rubric of Ahriman. And what ends up happening is that the most powerful sorcerers of the Thousand Suns survived the casting of the Rubric of Ahriman with their knowledge and powers greatly augmented. The Battle Brothers, whose psychic abilities have been slight or non-existent, by far the larger part of the 15th Legion, were altered in a much more profound way, being their armor was sealed shut, as if every clasp and joint had been welded together, and their bodies were reduced to nothing more than dimly sentient dust. So they literally
killed them.
They literally become golems. That's probably the best way to describe them. They literally become golems, like mindless.
Lack of knowledge. Got it.
Well, no, it's not just that lack of knowledge and ability. It's lack of knowledge and ability. So you could know everything you possibly to know about, doing sorceress stuff with the warp. If you couldn't do any of it, though, became a rubric marine.
I see you failed your last test.
Yeah.
Golem.
So, like I said, to put it bluntly, the Rubikai they're golems. They're pretty much mindless automatons that are used by the rest of the Thousand Suns but they're kind of more than golems just simply because they still have kind of that knack that they're still space marines. So they're still super strong, super fast. They still carry bolters. They're like, if you put a golem at Jedi level, you've got a rubric marine. Hope that answers your question.
Now, where were we? Ah, yes. Gulliman's warriors fired back, sending many of their ambushers reeling as their armor was rent and the dust that animated it spilled onto the ground. Cypher spun and dove through the mayhem, evading every shot fired his way and reaping a tally of the foe with his blazing pistols. Aldrich Fuldus, too, wrought havoc as he led a counterattack against the Thousand Suns. His warhammer swung in lightning-fast arcs, battering Rubikai to the ground amid clouds of glittering dust. Still, more Rubikai closed in, their sorceress masters upon their flying discs, hurling their spells into the loyalist ranks. Gulliman realized that to stay here was to fight an impossible battle, and to be lost with his goal in sight. It infuriated the Primarch to run yet again, for it seemed to him that since leaving Ultramar, he had done little else. Yet the greater goal was of more importance, and he knew that he would not aid his father's Imperium by dying here. Blade raised high, Gilliman led the movement to break out of the Thousand Suns ambush. Not all of his battle brothers could extract themselves from the fight safely, and more precious lives were lost as Space Marines were cut down by the enemy's fire. Yet, with the winged living saint cutting a path at their head, the Loyalists broke away from their attackers and fled deeper into the webway. They found themselves beset at every turn, yet they fought on until at last the Imperials reached the rune-sealed portal, fixing helms and rebreather cowls in place. Then, led by the Shadow Seer, they stepped from the webway and onto the surface of Luna. Gulliman stepped through the shimmering lights of the webway gate, enduring the unsettling doubling of reality that it created. He passed from the soft illuminations into harsh black shadow and searing glare, from air and gentle warmth into the frozen, airless lethality of near vacuum. Gravity bled away around him, and with a single step, Gulliman launched himself away from the webway gate into the billowing moon dust beyond. The Terran Crusade had emerged into a deep crater, much of which was immersed in inky blackness. Shafts of stark illumination fell from above, where the rays of Sol itself spilled over the lip of the deep pit. Conscious of the foes following close on their heels, the Loyalists climbed quickly up the pit's sides. Space Marines sprang upward, hand over fist, in low gravity, only 1/16th that of Terra. Tanks threw up drifting fans of moondust as they powered up the rocky slope. Skitarii marched relentlessly upward, ignoring their blackening and freezing organic components. These latter soldiers would not last long on the lunar surface, but they would endure long enough to serve the Omnissiah's needs. Above them, Celestine soared upward into the dark skies. Behind her, Veilwalker and her Harlequins lingered by the Webway gate. The Shadow Seer gathered her powers, leveling the staff towards the Webway portal and beginning a whispering chant. The runes upon the structure's flanks glowing fiercely with the searing light. Before Veilwalker could finish her ritual, the gate pulsed with dark energies. Blue fire billowed, its roar sounding as a dull rumble in the airless conditions. Veilwalker spun clear at the last moment, but many of her Harlequin followers were not so fortunate. Their lithe bodies were engulfed in flame, and as their dithodized suits burned away, so their bodies melted like wax or froze and died. From near the lip of the crater, Gulliman looked back to see the corrupted Webway gate glowing with dark fire. Streamers of energy leapt and coiled, dancing across the walls of the pit and blasting the Eldar corpses to ash. Out from the crackling storm stepped the first Rubric Marines, their footfalls muffled as they advanced across the crater floor. They raised their bolters and opened fire, cursed shells roaring up from below to slam into the Imperials. Armor ruptured and souls burned. Bulky bodies in the colors of Nova Marines and Mortifactors tumbled in slow motion down the slopes, clouds of chalky dust cascading around them. A Dreadnought toppled backwards, its pilot slain. The remaining Loyalists kept moving over the lip of the crater and out of the Thousand Suns' line of fire. Here, the retreat stopped at last. Gilliman and his surviving followers stood upon the surface of Luna itself. Near the heart of the Mare Tempestus, on every side loomed the rusted hulks of old and broken Imperial void ships, a graveyard of junked and decommissioned spacecraft left there to molder. Gothic leviathans swarmed with voidcraft and covered in glaring lights. The grandeur of the Luna docks still faded against the breathtaking sight of Terra itself, hanging stark against the blackness above. There was the destination that Gilliman sought, the end of his journey at last. Yet a deadly foe still chased the Primarch's heels and could not be allowed to work his malefic will within the sights of the throne world. Gilliman knew that the warp phenomena currently erupting in the crater's depths must surely have triggered every alarm and emergency auger within a dozen Terra souls. It would not be long before overwhelming Imperial forces raced to investigate, but there was no telling what irrevocable havoc Magnus could cause before they arrived. Gilliman saw again the visions Kairos had sent him, of a shattered world crashing down upon a fire-blackened Terra, and shuddered. He and his followers must hold the enemy here, driving the Thousand Suns back, or, at the least, keeping them suppressed until aid could arrive. The Thousand Suns were spilling from the Webway gate in increasing numbers. Scarab Occult and Rubikai, driven forward by Chaos Sorcerers on their flying discs. Their advance was steady but unstoppable, pushing up the crater walls with their guns blazing. Recognizing that the crater itself offered the best chance of containing the foe, Gilliman spread his warriors, combat walkers, and tanks around its lip, and commanded them to pour fire down into the advancing Thousand Suns. Space Marines, Skitarii, Dreadnoughts, Land Raiders, Vindicators, Doomcrawlers, Battle Servitors, and more opened fire, using the lip of the crater for cover, and making the most of the higher ground. The Loyalists sent volley after volley, ripping down into the heretic Astartes. Striding Amata were knocked back into the crater by devastating explosions. Glittering dust drifted from rents in ancient ornate armor, floating free in the low gravity, and leaving once animate undead armor suits to crumple and collapse. Armored corpses piled in heaps at the bottom of the craters surrounding the webway gate, with carrion remains. From cracks and rocky outcrops around the crater's edge, the last of the Harlequins add their own fire to the fusillade. Hails of monofilament discs cutting through power armor and the flesh of living demonic discs. For a time, it appeared as though the 1,000 suns would be bottled up in the crater. Though the return fire caused slow attrition amongst the loyalists, the traitors were losing far more warriors than they slew. Then a fresh pulse of dark power surged through the webway gate, its energies whirling faster and faster until they formed a flaming vortex. A wave of supernatural dread swept over the loyalist space marines as a huge horn-headed figure stepped through onto the surface of Luna. Spreading his wings wide, Magnus the Red looked up at Gulliman with a mocking smile.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for this week. Join us next week as we complete the Terran Crusade.
Wait a minute.
Yeah?
We're going to end on another cliffhanger?
It sure sounds like it, doesn't it? Well, on YouTube, unfortunately, we have to. If we drop the whole thing, it'll be too long and the algorithm would kill us. The good news is if you don't like cliffhangers, the whole conclusion is on our podcast right now.
Oh, well, I like that.
Indeed.
So, if you want to hear the whole thing, either wait until next week for it to drop on YouTube, or you can listen to it now on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Audible, Exoplayer, or pretty much anywhere else you can listen to podcasts.
Righto, brother. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit that like button, the bell, and the subscribe button.
And if you really enjoy this Vox, by all means, help us by becoming a member on our YouTube channel, Tales of Asharaka, or becoming a donor on our Spotify channel.
Indeed. Well, with that all said, as always, have a great day. And until next time,
This is Ekthar,
And Euxin.
signing off.